don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the podcast that no one asked for. My name is Guy.
And this is Babs.
And no one asked for this. Today, we are going to be talking about the first half of Season 1 of Star Trek Picard. It is a spiritual sequel, I suppose, to Star Trek The Next Generation, even though there have been many movies and other series in the time since TNG went off the air. This feels like the first true sequel, and obviously it stars Patrick Stewart as Picard. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the negativity out of the way. So this is a new category. It's called Nobody Actually Cares. So, Nobody Actually Cares. What do you got to say?
Okay, so I couldn't think of anything super negative to go with in this category.
It doesn't have to be negative.
But I just want to say I feel like the overarching theme that I'm getting from the show so far is they're really trying to de-villainize the Borg. And the Borg are one of the most badass group of villains there are. So I don't know how I feel about that yet, because I guess it doesn't make them any less badass, but they're really trying to show some humanity for the Borg, if that...
Nobody actually cares. When my online outrage, and I guess negative is the wrong word. It's the spirit of these type of comments is negative, even when you're saying something positive. If you've ever been on the internet, you'll be like, I really love Brie Larson, but I dislike Captain Marvel because I don't think she was charismatic enough. That kind of stuff. You're like, oh, you complimented the person, but then you said something fucked up. That's the kind of thing that...
Backhanded compliment.
That happens online a lot, but you never fucking hear it in real life. So my Nobody Actually Cares is... I'm not entirely sure Patrick Stewart is necessary here. I like the show. I love that he's in it. It makes me feel nostalgic because I watched TNG as a kid. But it doesn't really need him. Like, there's nothing yet in the story specific to Picard where he has to be there. The most interesting and fun characters so far are not Picard. Like, that's just the reality of the show we're watching.
I might disagree with you. I think he's an icon of, like, Star Trek and Starfleet, and he's done so much, so that showing his, like, clout is important. And also, he was a Borg, so we're getting a lot of Borg shit going on.
Does the story ultimately change if it's Worf?
No. Not so
instead
much.
of Picard. There you go. As long as it's a high-ranking military person that is disaffected, it doesn't really matter who it is.
Also, his relationship with Data, I think, is going to come into play a lot, as they tried to show earlier.
But is that just the end game making Thor the Dark World matter? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whereas they're like, hey, nobody watched Star Trek Nemesis, so we're going to remind you that at the end of that movie, Data sacrifices himself.
But at the same time, everybody that was on that ship had a great relationship with Data, so it could have been anybody.
Exactly.
He was a well-loved
guy. But in the end, nobody actually cares. Let's move on to our normal category, starting with the most memorable moment. Babs, what was your most memorable moment?
Okay, I chose a scene from episode 5, and it's near the end of the scene. And I chose it because of the action-packedness of this moment. This is where they're trying to trade for Bruce Maddox with this black market cyborg part dealer named Bajazel, which I love that name. It is silly as fuck.
I just call her Deanna Troi because they clearly cast someone that looked just like Marina Sirtis on purpose.
And she was like wearing these half-naked things and like...
She looked exactly like Deanna Troi. At first, I thought it was like a Deanna Troi clone, and that was going to be the story. And then it turned out to be a character unrelated to Deanna Troi.
I did think that. I thought maybe she was of the same race, but then I was like, she's, Yeah,
she even had a similar hairstyle to the one she had in season 1 of the series.
They were just maybe trying to do a little like...
I mean, there's an Easter egg, and then there's hey.
Anyway, in this scene, they're trying to trade for Bruce Maddox, and... So Bajazel and 7 of 9 have a history with one another. There was a very charged moment with them because I guess that lady killed one of 7 of 9's buddies.
Yeah. So. I mean, my most memorable moment is basically the same, which is the ending, because if you've been trained to watch Star Trek, I just preface this with, going into this, I didn't do much research on what Picard would be or what story they were trying to tell when the first episode premiered. And as you start watching it, you realize this is not a PG Star Wars, Star
this
Trek
is not for
story.
kids.
It's not PG. They do say fuck. It's a whole thing. But you're trained where at the end of that moment when Picard kind of talks her down and they have this like former Borg drone moment, even though Picard technically wasn't a drone, then you're like, yeah, that's how Star Trek goes. They're going to do the right thing ultimately. Even when they step on the line, they won't ever cross it. And then she immediately goes and murders the lady and says, fuck it. Like, I had to let Picard think what he was going to think, but
right.
I got to do what I got to do.
Let the old man have his dreams.
Yeah. And I didn't see it coming, so that's why it's my most memorable moment. Like, generally, you can tell how these things are going to go. Every other, even though they're edgy character that has come on screen, there was only 2 moments that I was generally like, I didn't see that coming. And it was when the blonde lady...
What's her name?
With the doctor.
Doctor.
When she murdered Maddox. And
yeah, I didn't see that coming.
And then when... Seven of Nine murdered the Deanna Troi clone.
Both in the same episode.
Both in the same episode within like a couple minutes of each other. So that was clearly they knew what they were doing to put those moments right next to each other. But it worked. And I would have liked to see more of Bjayzl, if not just to see her outfits. But, R.I.P. Maybe we'll get a flashback.
Maybe. There's a lot of flashbacks in this show.
Yeah, every episode seems to start with a flashback.
They have to give you the context because...
Next up, let's talk about our background bums and or bosses. And as usual, we are really awful at picking bums these days.
We don't hate things enough.
Yeah, it's just legitimately the last things we've been engaged with have been good. And so there's nothing to really nitpick at. Well, or nothing but nitpicks. Nothing to really have any gripes with. I would say I have a boss, of course. And it's going to go to Zhaban. Picard's butler that used to be a Romulan intelligence officer. She has to give all of the bullshit dialogue explaining the intricacies of Romulan culture and these secret societies. And they just sound like nonsense words when you hear them the first time. And, it has to be intense but also informative. And that's the hardest part to me of acting, where you're just like, here's 2 pages of nonsense words that you have to inject energy into. And then she also had badass fight scenes. So
she had a couple badass fight scenes.
She's my background boss. What about you, Babs?
My background boss is the Qowat Milat, which is a Romulan warrior nuns, group of warrior nuns who are basically they're like the enemy of the Tal Shiar, which is the Romulan intelligence agency, I guess. The Romulan CIA, as it were.
Yeah, that's who the Zhaban is a member of, or used to be a member of. But I try not to say all these nonsense words that people are just going to be like, that means nothing to me.
They sound kind of like Arabic-ish.
Unless you watched TNG very closely, they only appeared in 1 or 2 episodes. So
the Qowat Milat, Picard has a relationship with them because they kind of helped with getting the Romulans off of their homeworld before it was...
Yes. So the events that triggered the movie and the new 2009 Star Trek, in this universe, this is before the reboot, remake, whatever. So when Spock was doing whatever with the red matter to try to save Romulus from the star that was imploding or whatever, this is the eventuality of that timeline played out before the rogue Romulans went back in time and altered the timeline. So this is the alternate prime timeline, as it were.
Fucking timelines. Oh my god.
But this is as things would have played out. Romulus is destroyed, and Picard was trying to save as many people as he could, and these are some of the refugees.
Right. And so he has a relationship with there's a young man. So one of the things I really liked about the Qowat Milat is they practice the way of absolute candor, which I guess is kind of weird for Romulans. Which means you say every emotion you're feeling and thinking. And I just thought that was really cool, and they're kind of like badass.
Yeah, they don't leave anything
woman
unspoken.
Society. And they only pledge to lost causes, which I think is also very cool.
Yeah, it was. They are a new
Sounds like a bunch of women.
injection to the Star Trek universe.
Yes.
And I like them. I feel
Yeah.
like this series, they're going to get their shine on with whatever, Elnor? The guy
Eleanor.
that's in the series. But then they always can go back to other members of that order anytime they need to just pull a badass fighter into a storyline. Moving on. Let's give our special shout out. And as you stepped on mine earlier, my special shout out is I actually thought about giving it to Hot Romulan.
Hot Romulan?
Yeah, the spy guy that is hanging out with or that one is Sochi
With
or
the
Jawa
emo
Dash.
haircut?
It's Sochi. Hanging out with one of the android ladies. So that's what happens when you have a Hot Romulan. That was gonna be my pick, but I have to go with the Borg storylines because to me the most interesting twist that they've introduced is the idea of what happens to Borg drones when they're being reclaimed and how are they treated and how are they reintegrated into society. And they even use Hugh from iBorg as like the person in charge of like organizing those efforts. And of course he would understand because this is the first time we've seen him not as a Borg. He was a Borg. They fucked up his mind. He couldn't rejoin the Borg, so he owned it. He actually already started a like splinter cell of former drones, but now he is actually helping to get the implants out of them as much as possible. And so it's like using him, a TNG character, to like show that was kind of cool. And they're on an actual old Borg cube, and how people view them, how people treat them, what their value is to society is interesting because they're basically former slaves. They didn't have any say in them being assimilated.
Most of nobody is ever assimilated into the Borg. Like, go ahead.
You're not willingly just giving yourself over. Like, you know what I want? Cybernetic implants and no self-identity.
Sounds like a good deal.
So that is my special shout out. What about you?
So my special shout out goes to Bjayzl, the black market Borg parts dealer. Just because I thought she was super cool, and I'm sad that she died so soon. She had great costumes. We already talked about her a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Deanna Troy's clone.
Yeah.
Now let's get on to some meat and potato stuff. So we're going to talk about our most valuable performer. And to make it more interesting, we decided not to use Patrick Stewart as a nominee. So it is most valuable performer, non-Patrick Stewart edition. Even though I don't think I would have picked him anyway. But Babs, who you got?
I mean, I don't think I would have. This is who I would have picked anyway, even if we could include Picard here. I chose Rios, who is the captain of the La Serena, and I chose him because he's the captain of that ship as well. The actor plays all the billion different holograms that run the ship, and each one has their own personality and their own like accent and everything. And I just like him as the captain. He's just kind of a surly guy. Like there's an episode where the doctor comes in. He's like, "What are you reading?" He's like, "Oh, I'm reading this book about the tragic sense of life. It's about the existential pain of living with the consciousness of death and how it defines us as human beings."
Yeah,
like,
he's essentially
okay.
Han Solo in Star Trek.
Yeah.
They're like,
he's
hey,
a little bit more surly.
This is the Star Trek version of Han Solo. He's the captain of a ship that gets hired by Picard to take him where he needs to go because Starfleet wouldn't give him a ship. And he is a rogue, handsome person.
Charming.
Yes, like in his regular life. But then he has all the holograms that make it make his performance like more well-rounded. But he seems to be pretty straightforward. Like he's kind of in the background just shaking his head at all everyone's political agendas and opinions on stuff. And he's like, who cares? Yeah. I just care about getting paid. I do right things when I'm getting paid to do right things. I do wrong things when I'm getting paid to do wrong things. My most valuable performer is going to Michelle Hurd, who plays Rafi. And this is Picard's former first officer during the time that he was on the project to help the Romulans find a new home. So they went to this planet called Free Cloud, and there was supposed to be like a a system of shuttling, going back and forth between Romulus and Free Cloud, and not Free Cloud. What's the name of the planet?
Up on Vashti?
Whatever it was. Yeah, it's not Free Cloud. It's the other planet. And he was in the midst of that when there was this weird uprising of synthetics, basically androids, and then they got banned, and then they said fuck the Romulans and let them all basically die, and he is the face of the failure to save, billions of Romulan lives, which sucks to be that guy. But she was the first officer, and she got caught in the wave of fallout. So Picard basically said middle fingers to the sky, to Starfleet, and because she is connected with his, for lack of a better word, administration, then she lost her job, or her command, just as a part of his decision. Like, he did what he did because he's Picard. He didn't ask her and he didn't do anything. She didn't do anything wrong. They just were like, well, okay, if you're gonna middle finger to this guy to us, then fuck you and your whole crew. And she got caught in that, and she's kind of like, she's broken in multiple ways, and they're not kind of giving it to us all at once, but you can see it kind of how it plays out, because she's loyal, she's good at what she does. Obviously she's connected because she's doing most of the stuff. Like, she's like, whenever they need their like darknet, Star Trek version of darknet research, she's doing all that. Yeah. And then we find out like a strange relationship with her son as a result of everything that happened with Picard. It's just like, so she didn't just lose her job, she's also she has no relationship with her son. Yeah, she's a former addict, or because that whole thing, she's just like a ball rolling downhill for the last 15 years with negative momentum, and now we will see what the effects of this mission has on her going forward. But it feels like, I don't know, they could leave her character more broken as a result of this, or with some solace, and we'll just have to find out. And I like the way that she's playing it, and I look forward to what she does. So that's why she's my most valuable performer, because she's not say everything that's on her mind. She's definitely not absolute candor. No, she is playing it with her face. And that'll basically wrap up this episode. We're not gonna do a rating because we'll wait till the last 5 episodes of the show air, and then we will rate the whole season as one. But needless to say, if we're going to keep watching it, obviously we're not out. We are in on Picard. And, I've enjoyed talking about this as much as I've enjoyed talking about any television show this year. Agreed. So, if you were thinking that this was a waste of your time, remember,
no one asked for this.